The United States just executed a bold military operation to capture Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, bringing them to face charges on U.S. soil. This video explains why the Trump administration ordered the strike, the role of oil and energy resources in strategic decision-making, and how Venezuela's proximity and wealth made it a flashpoint in global power competition. We go deep into the geopolitics of energy, how Chinese and Russian influence in Venezuela shaped the risk calculus, and why this capture could reshape the balance of influence in the Western Hemisphere. You'll see how U.S. forces struck with precision, what the short-term and long-term implications are for oil markets, and what this means for the future of U.S. national security. This is a moment that matters. We break down what's next. Maduro. In U.S. custody, what comes next? Straightforward, serious, and curiosity-driven. Venezuela, after Maduro captured, what it means for America, broadens to the aftermath. Why the U.S. took Maduro and what happens next. Focuses narrative on motivation and consequence. Venezuela, oil, and power. Why the U.S. captured Maduro signals core themes of resources and strategy. Maduro captured the strategic case. Explain signals depth and analysis. The U.S. has captured Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Here's why it happened, how U.S. forces executed the operation, and what this means for global energy, national security, and the balance of power. In the early hours of January 3, 2026, the world woke up to an unprecedented announcement from the United States. President Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela, along with his wife, was taken into U.S. custody in a rapid military operation deep inside Venezuelan territory. This was not a diplomatic arrest. It was a calculated military strike. The U.S. military, acting on orders from the U.S. president, executed a swift and decisive mission that ended with Maduro on American soil facing federal charges. What just happened? Why did it happen? And what does it mean for U.S. security, global energy, and the balance of power? This is the story of how global geopolitics, natural resources, and strategic urgency converged in Operation Absolute Resolve. Nicolás Maduro has been Venezuela's leader for years, presiding over one of the world's most resource-rich nations. Venezuela sits atop some of the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, with an estimated 300 billion barrels of crude beneath its soil. Those reserves are roughly 4 times the size of U.S. oil holdings and account for a massive share of global supply potential. But decades of mismanagement, political turmoil, and poor infrastructure have kept Venezuela's oil industry in a state of collapse. Still, the sheer size of this energy endowment means Venezuela matters to every major global power. For the United States, Venezuelan oil and gas offers strategic leverage, both for domestic energy security and for weakening the grip of hostile regimes that depend on hydrocarbons for revenue. For China and Russia, Venezuela has been a strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere, tied together through loans, energy contracts, and political alignment. What happens in Venezuela doesn't stay in Venezuela. It ripples outward, shaping markets, alliances, and military calculations. Why did the U.S. take action now? This move was not impulsive. It was the culmination of months of escalating pressure and mounting risk assessments. The Trump administration framed the capture of Maduro as both a law enforcement action and a national security imperative. For years, Washington has accused the Maduro regime of drug trafficking, corruption, and ties to organized criminal networks. By indicting Maduro on charges including narco-terrorism and related offenses, U.S. officials argued they had a domestic legal basis for arrest. But legal justification was only part of the calculus. There was deeper strategic logic at play. Venezuela's location makes it uniquely proximate to U.S. territory. Its northern coast lies well within striking distance of the southeastern United States. In a world of great power competition, having an unfriendly, unstable regime so close to home was a liability. Control over Venezuelan oil isn't just about energy. It's about preventing hostile blocs from gaining influence in the hemisphere. China has poured billions into Venezuelan energy deals. Russia, too, has provided military and political support. Those ties represent a potential beachhead of influence just miles from U.S. shores. Taking Maduro into custody not only removes a figure seen as destabilizing, but also disrupts the web of alliances that have made Venezuela a proxy zone in the broader global contest. The military operation itself was swift. According to reports, U.S. forces launched a coordinated assault across northern Venezuela in the pre-dawn hours. Airstrikes struck key installations. Elite commandos moved on Maduro's compound in Caracas. Maduro and his wife were taken into custody and transported first to a U.S. vessel offshore, then flown to New York. They now face federal charges and are held in U.S. custody. The operation was named Operation Absolute Resolve. It involved multiple branches of the U.S. Armed Forces working in concert, showcasing rapid deployment capability, joint operational planning, and precision execution. Whether you view it as bold or controversial, the mission demonstrated that U.S. forces can strike at a moment's notice, execute high-stakes operations in hostile territory, and bring home their objective. That level of capability is unique in the modern world. Once the immediate shock of the capture settles, the bigger picture emerges. Venezuela's oil reserves dwarf those of nearly every other nation. Unlocking that energy potential could have wide-ranging effects on global markets, inflation, and the balance of economic power. U.S. leaders have already hinted that American energy firms will play a significant role in rebuilding Venezuela's oil infrastructure. That's not just a commercial opportunity, it's strategic leverage. If U.S. companies can rehabilitate Venezuelan production and funnel energy through markets on U.S. terms, it weakens the sway of rivals like China and Russia in global energy pricing. It also reduces the risk of supply shocks in a world still sensitive to disruptions. Beyond oil, Venezuela possesses significant natural gas and mineral wealth, including gold deposits that have financed conflict and corruption for decades. Control over these assets repositions the United States in the great power contest over resources. A stable, energy-productive Venezuela, aligned with U.S. interests, could offset the influence of foreign powers far more effectively than sanctions or diplomatic isolation ever did. Not everyone welcomed the operation. Russia demanded Maduro's release and condemned the United States, asserting that Venezuela's sovereignty was violated. Some nations called for peaceful, democratic transitions rather than military action. International law experts questioned the legality of a foreign military capturing a sitting head of state without United Nations authorization or congressional approval. Within the U.S., political leaders expressed a range of opinions from support for decisive action to concern over executive overreach. The United Nations Security Council convened emergency sessions to address the crisis. This isn't an isolated event. It's one node in a global struggle over influence, norms, and the future of international order. Maduro and his wife will appear in federal court to face indictment. Venezuela faces uncertainty at home. Power structures there are in flux. Interim leaders have been declared, but authority remains contested. For the United States, the focus will likely be on stabilizing the transition, managing Venezuela's oil resources, and navigating the diplomatic fallout. But the larger strategic point remains. This was not just a raid. It was a declaration of intent, a demonstration of what the U.S. can do when it integrates political will with military capability, a signal to adversaries that key interests, energy security, regional stability, and great power competition, are not abstract concepts. They are actionable priorities. The capture of Maduro marks a watershed in contemporary geopolitics. It is a moment that forces nations, markets, and militaries to reassess assumptions about power, proximity, and resource competition. For the United States, this operation underscores a posture of readiness, reach, and resolve. Whether history judges it as a bold strategic move or a controversial overstep will depend on what comes next. What is certain is that the ripple effects in energy markets, international relations, and strategic alignments will be felt for years. And one thing is clear. America just reminded the world that it can still move with force, purpose, and consequence